basketball, college football. I'm your host, Grayson Grunhafer, and today let's move to the Big 12. Let's talk a little bit about this Baylor versus Kansas State matchup. Baylor not quite ranked, but 6-3 in the conference. Kansas State 6-3. They are still currently ranked 23rd according to the AP. Baylor knocked off Oklahoma this weekend, 38-35 in Norman. Kansas State lost to Texas at home, 34-27. So let's start with the Bears' performance against Oklahoma. Final score 38-35, but I will say this, Baylor did break off a huge run at the very end of that game. Their running back fell on purpose to allow the time to run out. So really, I mean, if you watch the game, it did feel like Baylor was at least a touchdown better in my eyes, at least watching it. But who knows? That's up for debate, right? So as far as the Baylor side, they ran for 281 yards, won the time of possession 34-26, and this was without their leading running back, Richard Reese. Baylor was dealing with flu problems, so he left the game relatively early. So they relied on Squirrel Williams, who had a very, very nice game for the Bears this past weekend. And the big thing for Baylor was they had to be able to run the football, and the thought was, at least my thought was, they were going to be able to. That absolutely happened. 281 yards is a sensational showing for their rushing attack. Now, throwing the football, not as great. Blake Shapen, only 132 yards passing, a QBR of 18.4. If you watch the game, he just felt off. You know, it's just a missed throw here, a missed throw there. And in this Baylor offense, where you're running the ball so much and you're relying on play action, and you really just need Shapen to hit on a couple explosive plays, convert a few third downs, and then just be accurate on throws that are open. So the margin for error, it becomes very obvious when there are a few things just a little bit off, and things were just a little off for him in this one. As far as the Baylor defense goes, they forced 3 turnovers, all interceptions, all on Dillon Gabriel, and that is 8 forced turnovers in the last 2 games, all 8 by way of interception. So the Baylor defense definitely turning some things around as far as the turnover game goes. Defensively, though, they gave up 500 yards of total offense, including 238 yards on the ground. Not a great showing. It was a lot of missed tackles, very similar to a West Virginia game they played earlier in the year. Just sloppy football, and they gave up a few explosive plays in the pass game as well. I will mention, though, and I know Kansas State fans are very aware of this, when Dillon Gabriel plays for Oklahoma, that is a top 10 offense in the country scoring-wise. So I just want to caution people, when you go look at Oklahoma and you see the TCU game and the Texas game, remember, Dillon Gabriel was lost early in the second quarter against TCU and did not play against Texas. I guarantee you if he had played in those games, the scores would have been far different. I'm not saying they would have won them, but I think those games look much closer than they ended up being. Moving on to the Kansas State side, like I said, they lost 34-27. They were down 31-10 at half, could have been down like 38-10 at half. They just got completely outplayed, and a big part of it was their best cornerback, one of their best tacklers in the secondary, Julius Brents. He got called out of the game on a very early targeting call. Thought it was pretty questionable, but either way, they had to adjust to life without him, and it did not go well at all in the first half. It just took them time, right, to adjust. In the second half, they only allowed 3 points to Texas. They really climbed all the way back in this game. They got the ball with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left to try to go tie it. They were down by 7, and Adrian Martinez fumbled the ball, lost the ball with 24 seconds left. Earlier on the drive, he fumbled it and almost got it picked up by Texas. So they were fortunate to still have a chance on that drive, but once again, Martinez's late game fumbling turnovers continue to cost Kansas State, and really it cost him at Nebraska as well. Big thing for Kansas State that I took away here. Kansas State gave up 269 yards on just 40 carries, and they only ran for 139 yards. This Kansas State team is built to win up front. They simply did not win up front at all in this game against Texas. Secondary played okay. They held Quinn Ewers to only 197 yards passing. But in general, when you give up that kind of rushing display to that Texas team, it's going to be very hard to beat them. And unfortunately for the Wildcats, it cost them. So now we're sitting here, both teams 6-3, 4-2 in the Big 12. And so here are kind of my biggest takeaways when I look at this game, when I was diving into some of the stats and some of the film that I watched and what has been a trend for both of these teams. So Kansas State is the 71st ranked run defense in the nation. They give up 148 rushing yards per game. Now, that's not horrible. It's not good, but it's not horrible. But here's where it gets really bad. The Wildcats have given up rushing performances of 269 yards against Texas, 215 yards against TCU, 220 yards against Oklahoma, and 160 versus Tulane. All four of those teams have top 50 rushing offenses, and Baylor is 19th. Baylor's going to run the football, and Baylor's going to be able to run the football against Kansas State. That seems pretty evident. They're one of the best rushing teams that K-State has played this year. So the Bears are capable of getting to 200 yards rushing in this game, and honestly, that should be the expectation for this Baylor football team. Now, in the passing game, this is where things get a little interesting, though, for Kansas State's defense versus Baylor's offense. So Kansas State, the only teams that have eclipsed 200 yards passing are TCU, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma. The Wildcats' passing efficiency defense is 25th in the country. And currently, Baylor quarterback Blake Shapen has only 2 games where he's thrown for over 250 yards. Both of those were in losses when you're kind of playing catch-up or attacking a secondary, or basically you're in a shootout, right? Those are the only 2 times he's thrown for over 250 yards. He also has 4 games where he's thrown for under 185 yards. The Bears are 3-1 in those games. The only loss is to BYU. So in my eyes, the safe bet is Blake Shapen's probably going to throw for less than 200 yards. So the question is, can Baylor win that way? They've been able to win that way, but we'll see if they're going to be able to, because it looks like Kansas State is probably going to be able to limit them in the pass game, at least to an extent in this one. So it'll come down to efficiency for Blake Shapen in the passing game. For Kansas State on offense, 3 losses this year. In those 3 losses, they're averaging 161 yards on the ground. In their 6 wins, they're averaging 247 yards rushing. Their run game protects Adrian Martinez 100%. Martinez is not the most accurate quarterback, but when he gets in a rhythm, when he's able to run the football, able to get things going on the ground, it really opens up things in their passing game. And once you're able to get Deuce Vaughn loose, it's very tough to contain them. And that's kind of where things are at on that side. Who's going to win up front, right? That's going to be kind of the biggest thing in my eyes. I believe the edge is to Baylor, especially at home. But I will say Kansas State has shown glimpses of what they can be, and if they can put it all together, it's going to be tough for Baylor to beat them. One more thing that I kind of looked at, I think the schedule is important for both of these teams, honestly. Kansas State's already played Texas and TCU. Baylor is not. So my question here is, has Baylor been tested? Has Baylor played a really good team this year? I don't know. I don't know that they have. I think the 3 best teams on their schedule are going to be the next 3 that they play. So is this upping in competition going to hurt them? I don't know. I think that's something that definitely should give Baylor fans some pause and give Kansas State fans a little bit of hope there that, hey, maybe Baylor isn't as tested. Maybe they're not as good as kind of their record says they are. On the flip side of that, Kansas State's 1-2 since coming off of their bye. Baylor's won 3 straight since losing the game to West Virginia, in which Blake Shapen got hurt in the 3rd quarter in that one. So it's also the theory of who's trending up, who's trending down. That's another conversation that needs to be had for both of these teams going forward. In general, Baylor is a 3-point favorite in this one. The over-under is 53 points. I'm going to take Baylor here. I think the advantage up front lies with Baylor. I think the home field advantage lies with Baylor, who hasn't been at home in a while now. And I think that's going to be key for them. So I got the Bears winning this one 33-27, which means I'm also on the over 53 points as well. Should be a great game, another really close game in the Big 12, but I'll take the Bears to win this one. So stay tuned. Later in the week, I'll have more previews, more predictions, and of course, my best bets at the end of the week. But thanks for listening to Crystal Ball College Football.